My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm 31 years old and I live in Nevada, USA. 3 months ago, my life completely fell apart. I lost my apartment. I lost my job. And after my father passed away, I stopped caring about almost everything. I packed whatever I owned into my old pickup truck and drove across Nevada looking for work. Every application I sent was rejected. Construction, gas stations, warehouses, nothing. Then one evening, I found a strange job posting. Night caretaker needed. Black Rock Highway rest stop. 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Good pay. No experience required. The place was nearly 80 miles from the nearest town. I called the number. A deep voice answered almost immediately. "Can you start tonight?" I didn't even hesitate. Yes. The man introduced himself as Walter Hayes. He sounded exhausted. Before hanging up, he paused. Then he quietly said, "There are a few rules." I laughed. I've worked security before. I know how these things go. His voice became serious. "No, you don't," he continued. Rule 1. If the payphone outside rings after 2:13 a.m., do not answer it. I smiled. "That's the first rule? Just promise me." "I promise." Rule 2. If you see headlights parked outside, but no vehicle, stay inside until sunrise. My smile disappeared. "What? You heard me?" Silence. Then he added one last thing. "If someone knocks on the office window, never let them in, even if they know your name." The line went dead. I figured the old guy just enjoyed messing with new employees. Around 7:45 p.m., I reached the rest stop. It was exactly what you'd expect. A tiny brick building. 4 gas pumps that hadn't worked in years. Old vending machines. A public restroom. A single payphone standing beneath a flickering streetlight. Nothing but endless desert surrounding it. The wind carried sand across the empty parking lot. It felt like the entire world had disappeared. Inside the office, everything looked surprisingly clean. There was a coffee machine, security monitors, a flashlight, a first aid kit, and a thick notebook labeled Night Log. The first few pages were normal. Weather reports, cleaning schedules, maintenance notes. Then, the handwriting changed. Large, shaky, almost desperate. "If the phone rings, don't answer." A few pages later, she copies voices, then another. "Don't believe the crying." Someone had written the same warning dozens of times. I suddenly remembered Walter's strange phone call. Maybe this wasn't a joke after all. At exactly 9:12 p.m., the radio crackled. "Daniel?" A woman's voice. "This is Emily from Highway Patrol Dispatch." Finally, a normal human voice. She explained that she checked on every overnight caretaker every few hours. "If anything strange happens, call me immediately." I almost laughed. "Depends what you call strange." There was a short pause. Then she quietly replied, "You'll know." The radio went silent. That answer stayed in my head. Midnight arrived peacefully. No cars, no people, only the sound of the desert wind. At 1:47 a.m., I noticed something odd. A pair of headlights appeared far down the highway. I waited. They never moved. 10 minutes later, they were still there. Same distance, same brightness. Not getting closer, not driving away. Just watching. Then, without warning, the lights disappeared. No turning, no engine, nothing. Just gone. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I checked every security camera. The parking lot was empty. The highway was empty. Nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. At 2:13 a.m., the payphone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed across the empty desert. I froze. Walter's first rule. I forced myself to stay in my chair. The ringing continued for almost a full minute. Then, it stopped. I let out a breath. A second later, the office phone rang. I answered without thinking. Black Rock, rest stop. Silence. Then, a little girl's voice whispered, "Daddy, why didn't you answer me outside?" Every hair on my body stood up. "I don't have children." The voice started crying. Soft at first, then louder. "Please, it's cold." My hand began shaking. I reached for the radio. Static. Only static. The crying suddenly stopped. Then the same little girl giggled. Not a normal laugh. A slow, broken, almost choking laugh. The office lights flickered. Every security monitor turned black. For exactly 3 seconds. When the cameras came back, someone was standing beside the payphone. A woman, completely still. Long black hair, a white dress moving gently in the wind. She wasn't using the phone. She was simply staring directly at the camera. And then, she smiled. The woman didn't move. She simply stood beside the payphone, smiling. Every instinct told me to lock the office door, but I couldn't stop staring at the security monitor. Her smile never changed, not even for a second. Then, the camera suddenly filled with static. When the picture returned, she was gone. I grabbed my flashlight and looked through the office window. The parking lot was empty. No footprints, no movement, nothing. I told myself the camera had glitched. It had to be. Just then, the radio crackled. "Daniel?" It was Emily. Her voice sounded rushed. "Did the phone ring?" My heart skipped. "Yeah. How did you know?" There was a long silence. Then she quietly said, "Listen carefully. Whatever you do, don't leave the building tonight." Before I could ask why, the radio died. Complete silence. I checked every channel. Nothing. Around 3:05 a.m., a loud knock echoed across the office window. 3 slow knocks. I turned my flashlight toward the glass. A man stood outside. He wore a dirty highway patrol uniform. His face was covered in dust. He looked exhausted. "Please," he said. "My truck broke down. I just need to use your phone." For a moment, I actually believed him. Then I remembered Walter's last warning. Never open the door. The man smiled. Exactly the same smile as the woman. Too wide. Too perfect. His eyes never blinked. "I know your name, Daniel. I know you're alone. Open the door." I slowly stepped backward. He kept smiling. Then, he knocked again. Harder this time. Bang, bang, bang. The entire window shook. Suddenly, everything stopped. The man was gone. I rushed to the security monitors. Nothing. No one outside. It was as if he had never existed. I was beginning to panic. At 3:41 a.m., the office lights flickered again. This time, the emergency generator turned on by itself. The room filled with a low humming sound. Then, every monitor switched to the same camera, the payphone, standing beneath the streetlight. Empty. A second later, the phone rang again. Once, twice, 3 times. Then, without anyone touching it, the receiver slowly lifted into the air. My blood turned cold. It was hanging there, swinging gently, as if someone invisible had answered it. A voice echoed through the office speakers, not from the phone, from every speaker at once. "Daniel." It was my father's voice, exactly the way I remembered it. "Son, come outside." Tears filled my eyes. My father had died 3 months earlier. This couldn't be real. The voice came again. "I've been waiting for you." For one terrible moment, I almost reached for the door. Then I remembered something written inside the night log. She copies voices. I stepped away. The voice instantly changed. Now it sounded angry. You left me. You let me die. The walls seemed to vibrate. The lights flashed rapidly. Then, everything went silent. At exactly 4 a.m., the office door handle slowly turned. Someone was trying to come inside, very slowly, very carefully. The lock held. For nearly 2 minutes, the handle kept moving. Then, it stopped. A few seconds later, footsteps circled the building. Slow, heavy, crunching across the gravel. One full circle, then another, then another. Whatever was outside was waiting. I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair until the first orange light of sunrise appeared over the desert. As soon as daylight touched the parking lot, every strange sound disappeared. The air suddenly felt normal again. At 6:15 a.m., an old green pickup truck pulled into the parking lot. Walter stepped out. He looked at my face, then quietly asked, "You saw her, didn't you?" I couldn't even answer. He walked over to the payphone, bent down, and picked up something from the ground. A small silver badge, a Nevada Highway Patrol badge, exactly like the one the smiling man had been wearing. Walter stared at it for several seconds, then slipped it into his pocket. Without another word, he looked at me and whispered, "You survived your first night. Most people don't." He turned toward the endless desert, then added one final sentence that made my blood run cold. "Tonight, she'll know your name." I should have quit. I should have climbed into my truck and driven until the desert disappeared behind me. Instead, I stayed. Maybe it was the money. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe she had already chosen me. Walter handed me an old leather notebook before leaving. "It belonged to the first caretaker," he said. "If you want to survive, read every page." The notebook was nearly 40 years old. Most of the pages were stained with dirt and dried blood. The final page contained only one sentence. "She cannot enter where the morning sun touches, but every night she grows stronger." The second night arrived. By 11 p.m., the desert was unnaturally quiet. No wind, no insects, no distant traffic. Nothing. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the payphone rang again. I didn't even look at it. Then, someone laughed outside, not the woman, a little boy. I slowly checked the security monitor. A young child, no older than 8, stood beneath the streetlight. He was holding a worn-out teddy bear. He looked directly into the camera, then smiled. The same impossible smile. The office temperature dropped instantly. Frost began forming around the windows. The radio suddenly came alive. "Daniel!" Emily shouted. "Listen carefully! Walter lied to you!" Before she could continue, a deafening burst of static cut her off. Then another voice replaced hers. "Walters, don't believe anyone tonight." The radio went dead. My head was spinning. Who was telling the truth? Suddenly, every light inside the building went out. Only the moonlight remained. Then, I heard footsteps. Not outside, inside. Slow, steady, walking across the office floor. But I couldn't see anyone. The footsteps stopped behind me. A cold breath touched the back of my neck. I refused to turn around. The notebook. I remembered the notebook. Its last page. Morning sunlight. She fears the sun. Then another page caught my attention. Someone had written one final hidden rule between the lines. Rule 10. If she enters the building, survive until sunrise. Never look into her eyes. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor. The footsteps circled me. Once, twice. 3 times. Then, I heard whispering, dozens of voices, all speaking together. My father's voice, Emily's voice, Walter's voice, even my own voice. Each one begging me to look up. I squeezed my eyes shut. Minutes felt like hours. Then, a loud crash shattered the silence. The first rays of sunlight burst through the eastern windows. Instantly, every whisper stopped. The cold vanished. The footsteps disappeared. I slowly looked up. The office was empty. Outside, the smiling woman stood beside the payphone one final time. Sunlight touched her feet. For the first time, her smile disappeared. She looked afraid. Her body began breaking apart into black ash. The desert wind carried the ashes away. The payphone rang one last time, then fell completely silent. Walter arrived an hour later. He stared at the empty payphone, then smiled with relief. "You ended it," he whispered. He finally told me the truth. Decades ago, a family had been killed during a terrible highway accident near the rest stop. The mother survived for several hours beside the old payphone, calling for help that never came. She died before anyone answered. People said her spirit stayed there, waiting for someone, anyone, to answer the phone. Every person who did joined her forever. I left that same morning. I never returned. The old rest stop was demolished 6 months later. The payphone disappeared. People say the highway is safe now. I wish I believed that. Because last week, while driving through Arizona, I stopped at another lonely rest area. There was no building, no gas station, just one old payphone beneath a flickering light. As I walked past, it started ringing. The screen on my cell phone lit up at the exact same moment. 2:13 a.m. I didn't answer either phone, but just before I got back into my truck, I noticed someone standing across the empty parking lot. A woman. Long black hair, a white dress, and an impossibly wide smile. Maybe Walter was wrong. Maybe she was never trapped in one place. Maybe she was only waiting for someone else to answer. The end.